if Susan Rice had nothing to do with Benghazi, why is she talking about Benghazi?
That was my first question. Why is she out there, parroting the White House line?
Well, because she was a willing team player. They wanted somebody to go out and put a political spin on a national security story that would hurt the narrative that we killed bin Laden and Al-Qaeda's been dismantled. She was she did that voluntarily. She was eager to do it. I'm holding her accountable for the part she played in Benghazi. She told the world a misleading, completely inaccurate story, and 4 people are dead, and she is not going to get promoted with my vote. There are plenty of qualified people the president could pick. I generally am very deferential to presidential picks when it comes to judges and cabinets. I think that's the way the system should work. But when you play the game like Susan Rice, I will take the ball, Mr. President. I will run with it. She had no knowledge of Benghazi. She's not responsible for consulate security. She took this on herself, and she played the game, and I think she played it poorly.
Well, and she also basically just regurgitated what they told her to say, which almost makes this worse. Now, a couple of things came out of this, because this is the first time that he's admitting that the White House picked her for these TV appearances. We didn't know that before today.
And why her? Why not Secretary Clinton? Why not somebody that actually had some responsibility and knew something about Benghazi? The reason they picked her, she's loyal to President Obama. She's been with him for years. And quite frankly, I'm looking for a spokesperson in the Department of State who represents America that I can trust. I don't trust her. I think she's a political operative. I don't think she's done that great a job in the UN. The Russians and the Chinese are kicking us all over the place.
Let me ask you, she made these appearances 5 days after the attack that killed the first ambassador in 30 years, 5 days after. Now, we're told, based on testimony from Charlene Lamb at the Department of State, that they were watching the attack in real time. We're told that our intelligence community knew at the latest within 24 hours, but they knew within hours what had really happened here. We were told all, by the president of Libya and by multiple people, including, CIA people on the ground in Libya, that what had happened here. So we knew. Did we have people watching this in real time or not?
Well, it's pretty clear from press reports that a drone was overhead in real time. It has been validated that the CIA station chief reported back to Washington, we're under attack, and he named the group involved. The August 15th memo from Ambassador Stevens to Secretary Clinton said there are 10 identified al-Qaeda militia groups in Benghazi. If we get attacked in a coordinated fashion, we cannot defend the consulate. Lieutenant Colonel Wood said that we were the last flag flying in Benghazi. The Red Cross left, the British left. And if the president's worried about me blaming Susan Rice, I'm going to hold her accountable for what I think she did, which was basically mislead the American public or completely indifferent to the truth. But I do hold him accountable. Did the president know in June and April of this year that we were attacked at the consulate? And if the president was informed of the June attack, which blew a hole in the wall, then the president needs to explain to the nation what he did afterwards. Why did he leave the consulate open? Why didn't he close it or reinforce it? So, yes, I blame Barack Obama above all others. Don't mistake that.
All right, let's go through this slowly here, because you mentioned the British ambassador left. We were the only people left standing there.
The Red Cross left.
The Red Cross left. We had our own ambassador now. We've been able to corroborate and confirm that he requested multiple times additional security. He was denied that. It was even reduced after he had made the request and then put back to the levels that they were at. But clearly there was a threat. They were informed about it. They did nothing. So this is the before part.
Right.
Who's to blame for that? Why didn't they give the security that was requested?
Well, I think at the the State Department people who have hands-on control of consulate security failed us miserably. The British chose wisely, we chose poorly. If the president was informed of the attack in June, that's a national security event. He should be asking questions. How could this be? What's the security situation like? Was he informed that a week later the British ambassador was attacked and they closed their consulate? Here's what I think happened. The narrative that we're not going to be Bush, that we can, bring peace to the world without having a big military presence like Bush, we're going to prove it in Libya. So the reason they denied additional security requests for American personnel is they wanted to normalize relationships with the Libyan government. Well, the Libyan government had no presence in Benghazi. Al-Qaeda flags were flying over Libyan government offices in Benghazi. And when you look at the stream of reporting, and it ends in September the 11th, the day that he was killed, it breaks your heart. These people were begging for additional help. The RSO, the regional security officer, testified before Congress that he thought the Taliban were on the inside of the State Department. I think Secretary Clinton needs to answer for why she did not acknowledge the additional security request. The last, August 15th cable went to her directly. So the State Department needs to account for it. Why were there no DOD assets available on September the 11th for 8 hours? What was the CIA up to? How could they not see this coming? And at the end of the day, I blame President Obama above all others for allowing the consulate to become a death trap.
Well, I think ultimately it's got to stop with him. Now, there are further questions here. During the attack, remember, this became a little bit of a campaign issue, although I'd argue that the media ignored a lot of this. And that is that when did the president know that this was an attack? Why 2 weeks after was he still pushing this line that this was related to a YouTube video? 2 weeks later, he's asked, he goes to the UN, he tells Joy Behar, and in one other interview he said the same thing. He couldn't say it was a terrorist attack, but yet we're told we saw it in real time. We were told by everybody on the ground, et cetera here. So, have we corroborated? We know that Ty Woods, who was the Navy SEAL, who was told to stand down, was a mile away at the annex, but Americans were under fire, and he disobeyed those orders, went to save Americans. So he knew that they were under fire, and all these requests that went back to Washington asking for help and begging for help, he didn't die until 7 hours later.
Well, that's the point. Before, during, and after, there's a major national security failure. Let's get back to the attack itself. It had no makings of a mob, spontaneous riot. It had the makings of a military-type operation. You're attacking two targets a mile apart. You're doing this with heavy weapons, including mortars. They have Al-Qaeda types at the hospital where Ambassador Stevens was sent. So all of the reporting in real time suggests an Al-Qaeda coordinated attack. And what do we know months before the attack? People on the ground are not worried about Islamic videos. They're worried about Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is taking over Benghazi. The British leave because their ambassador was attacked, and the Red Cross closes their office. We're the only people left, and the reason we stayed, I think, in such an unsecure fashion is to prove a point that was no longer holding water, that you can lead from behind. And the reason we were denying people security requests is that we wanted to normalize relationships so we wouldn't be like Bush and have a bunch of Americans trying to protect the consulate. And the reason they told us after the attack it was a video, spawned by a video, a right mob, is because they're less culpable. If, in fact, it was an Al-Qaeda attack that you could see coming for months, so much for killing bin Laden, Al-Qaeda's been dismantled.
Well, the president has, it seems that if nobody is telling him the truth and the State Department had knowledge of what happened in real time and others, our intelligence community, had knowledge that it happened in real time and they're not telling him, well, that kind of fits into what's happening with General Petraeus as well, because the argument that they're making here is that Eric Holder knew since the summer that the CIA director likely had an affair that was being investigated, and the FBI director knew this, and nobody thought that a CIA director compromised that the president needs to know. Is that plausible?
Well, all I can tell you, I can tell you this. It's not plausible that the president was not informed of the April-June attacks on the consulate. Imagine this. The president goes out into the public. He's asked by a reporter, could you comment, Mr. President, about the attack on our consulate yesterday in Benghazi? What if he said, I don't know what you're talking about? He would look incredibly detached. So it's not possible that he wasn't aware of the previous attacks. From June forward, I think he owns the outcome in Benghazi. Susan Rice owns the fact that she volunteered for an assignment to, I think, mislead the American people. She's going to be held accountable. And if the president is worried one moment that Senator McCain and myself are not going to try to talk about his leadership, he need not worry. I mean, I will work with him on the fiscal cliff. We'll try to solve immigration.
Yeah, don't raise tax rates.
Don't worry over my dead body, because you got to create jobs, my friend, and you got to get the country out of debt and create
I think the
jobs.
president.
I'm not going to raise. But the point is, I'm 57 years old. I can fight him on Monday, and I can work with him on Tuesday. What I saw today was a president a little bit unhinged here. He's sensitive about this, and he should be wanting to find out what. Can you imagine this if we're Bush?
Oh, no, of course not. Let me ask you about Bill Kristol. He's saying that a source told him on Capitol Hill that one of the members of Congress, was talking to General Petraeus, and Petraeus said, "Do you want the official line or do you want the real truth?"
Well, I don't know what Bill's source is, but I would think I admire General Petraeus. I hope he and his family can repair the damage that's been done, and he deserves respect for the job he's done for the country, but he also has to testify. Why would General Petraeus suggest this was a riot, mob riot, spurned by video, when everybody in the CIA is saying otherwise? The more you know about Benghazi, the less likely the video story holds. Why is the president, for 10 days later, trying to explain this as a Cairo-like incident rather than an al-Qaeda coordinated attack? Why? Because if it's an al-Qaeda coordinated attack, so much for the narrative, bin Laden's dead, al-Qaeda's been dismantled. They ran out the clock, Sean. The media let us down. They're able to get this behind them in terms of the election. And I can tell you, if a Republican had been in a similar situation, it had been front page news morning, noon, and night.
Would you, speaking, and I know you were very outspoken earlier today as it relates to Susan Rice and her nomination for Secretary of State, I was shocked that they're at least trial ballooning the idea that John Kerry could be Secretary of Defense, a guy who threw his medals back and accused our brave men that fought in Vietnam of being murderers and Genghis Khan and torture. And remember all those quotes that became a big issue when he ran for president. Would you support that? Well, all I can tell you is I'm not going to hold him, what he said in Vietnam and is not going to drive my thinking. Quite frankly, I'll give a lot of leeway to the president. I think John Kerry's been around the world and understands the world pretty well. He's not somebody I would choose. But at the end of the day, Sean, I don't lightly say no to a president and his cabinet. I'll have a hard time saying John Kerry is not fit. He ran for president of the United States. He almost won. I have a real easy time telling the American public Susan Rice does not deserve to be promoted. Where does this all go from here? And what if the president lied? I think, then there's remedies for that. I think the Congress is making a fatal mistake here. We should have a select committee of the relevant committees, Homeland Security, Foreign Relations, Armed Services Committee, the Intel Committee. Here's what I fear, that one committee will hear from Petraeus, we'll interview Panetta and General Ham, and Hillary Clinton or someone else will testify in front of the Foreign Relations Committee, and you can't compare their stories. If there was ever a time for the Congress to create one committee made up of all the relevant committees to ask coordinated questions and compare the answers, it is now. The stovepipe approach that we're going on is going to lead to failure, and I'm just begging the body, take the death of these 4 people seriously, put a joint select committee together, and wherever the truth takes you, it takes you. All right, Senator, we're going to continue more of this tonight on Hannity. Thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it. Senator Lindsey Graham, quick break. We'll continue.